This is episode 2 of the Shite Guide to Provo. And as the series goes on, we're going to explore all the different aspects of the Provos, the group who set off the counter-cultural revolution of the 1960s, which inspired Amsterdam and the world to attack the status quo by bizarre and irrational means. So, over the next few months, we'll be zeroing in on different characters in each chapter. And while we're doing it, we'll take a stroll around the city to visit the spots where history was made. And there's no better place to start learning about this entire situation than learning about the man who lit the fuse on this tinderbox. The man who carved this symbol here into the Royal Palace on Dam Square was the same man who radicalized the city of Amsterdam, changing the course of history and setting the stage for the counter-cultural revolution. A larger-than-life character, he was known by many names. He was known by the witch doctor, the anti-smoking magician, and the prophet of the Provos. So I think it's time that we actually jump straight into the world of Amsterdam's court jester and learn about how he took on the grey, boring world of post-war Europe, and through his prophecies and his anarchistic guerrilla street theatre, he transformed Amsterdam into the Mecca of the 1960s. He transformed it into the magic centre. And his name was Robert Jasper Grootveld.
There goes the neighborhood, here come the Provos. Working for the man is a no-no. Staying on the low-low, playing with the po-po. When you're with the crew, you're never gonna roll solo. There goes the neighborhood, here come the Provos. Trying to give the world back its mojo. The people with no hope need to go loco. Here come the Provos to fuck up the whole show.
We want to make a revolution. We want to be the fifth column of the third world.
Robert Jasper was many things. A provocateur, a political activist, a cross-dressing weed-puffing exhibitionist, but he was first and foremost an artist. So that means he was broke as fuck with a shit job.
I wanna be an artist. I may not be the sharpest, may not be the smartest, but I work the hardest, pushing it the farthest. Oh, I wanna be an artist.
Actually, he had over 60 jobs. So clearly we're dealing with a man who was looking for his place in the world. And right here is where he did his last ever day of regular work as an upstanding member of the working community, as a window washer in the Hirsch building.
I wanna be an artist. The tribes are my targets, ripe for the harvest. Strike like a Marxist, bypass the market. So I wanna be an artist. I wanna be an artist. I may not be the sharpest, may not be the smartest, but I work the hardest, pushing it the farthest. So I wanna be an artist.
Overlooking the light supply in the 1960s, Robert Jasper would have been in the thick of all the youthful weirdos and subcultures. And as he decided to put down his bucket and brush for the last time, he decided that he was going to convert every single teenager below him into his followers, and he was going to clean the cobwebs from the windows of a dirty, grey and boring society. Amsterdam had no idea that a tidal wave was about to wash away an entire era and usher in a new age of hedonism and madness, the age of the happenings.
Who's that there looming up on the horizon? A million opinions, a billion disguises, leading the blind. He's free and he's wild and he's wise. He's mad in the eyes and he's sad when he smiles. Spectacular, driving the tribe with beguiling vernacular. Okay, Manier, I hope that's clear. Let me introduce you to the Rook Magier. He's the hitman, the happener. He's the hitman, the happener. He's the hitman, the happener. The hitman.
Robert Jasper's first artistic ploy happened in the canals. He decided to live on a homemade raft, and every day he'd come out and float about the light supply and wearing his finest suits and dining on a table in the raft like a fancy old boy. And when he got reported about in the newspapers, he reveled in his newfound fame, and he learned about the power of publicity. He liked it, and he was determined to chase the high. But to do that, he was going to have to raise the stakes. And this was certainly a man who knew how to raise the stakes. Looking for inspiration, he took a trip to South Africa, and while there, he immersed himself in local culture and watched the people taking part in their rituals with their magic spells and strange festivals and their gatherings around totem poles. He began to visualize his future and decided to return to Amsterdam with his newfound inspiration, and his first enemy was in his sight. Years before the world caught up, Robert Jasper was out here in the streets screaming about the ills of smoking tobacco. And this man should have known. He smoked like a fucking chimney. He began targeting the advertisement pillars which are dotted all around the city, which at the time were mainly advertising cigarettes. And he was dubbing them the totem poles of the Western asphalt jungle. He began the K campaign. The K campaign, or the Conquer campaign, was his first attack on the plastic Western society. He began to preach the gospel by vandalizing any cigarette adverts he could find by scrawling the word conquer or cancer all over them. He literally hit every advertisement pole in the city, and soon it became so well known that just the K would suffice to get the message across. Needless to say, the tobacco and advertising companies didn't appreciate it. They took him to court to sue him for damages, but he was an artist, a broke fucking artist, and he had no intention of paying the ludicrous fine. So he was jailed for 60 days. When he was finally released, he had a long hard think about what he had done, and he fucking did it again. Robert Jasper was straight back to facing advertisements for his K campaign, and they locked him up for another 60 days. You can bring all your millions and your teams of lawyers and friends in the government, but you cannot defeat a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. These clowns really did not know who they were dealing with. So after his second stint in prison, Robert Jasper decided to raise the stakes again. And it was on this street here where he was given a building by a sympathizer to carry on his messianic assaults. And right here on this street, he was given a building to develop his magic powers. And he turned this building into the anti-smoking temple.
The hitman.
You know, I'm just an exhibitionist. I'm just an exhibitionist of my own addiction, for instance. Where are the cigarettes? I never buy cigarettes. Never buy them. I smoke them for my neighbor addictions. From the other nicotinists. From the other addicts. I ask them and they give to me.
So here in this building, Robert Jasper would hold court, transposing the shamanic rituals he'd witnessed in South Africa over his mad antics to attack the wizards of the advertising industry and a plastic society. He gathered all the floating youth to his palace and would give wild sermons.
A happening is a happening is a happening is a happening is a happening. Everything is happening.
When you're thinking of the 60s, you generally think of, strange hip motherfuckers doing wacky hip shit. But this was the early 60s, and no one had ever seen shit like this before. No one really knew what they were witnessing. They just knew it was cool. And he would hold bizarre incantations to fight the evil magic of the West.
Oh, publicity, 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 publicity.
One night, in a wild parody of the Dutch communist Vondelpark, who burned down the Reichstag in 1933, Robert Jasper soaked a load of newspapers and petrol inside the building with all the crowds of his followers. He set the newspapers alight, and in the ultimate act of artistic vandalism, he burned the whole fucking building to the ground. Truth be told, it was a bit of both. They were now living in the age of the happening.
At first I wasn't able to believe, but I'm beginning to. He tore down and burned every pillar I was clinging to. Slapping on the war paint and wondering what will he do. He's coming down the chimney and he's fucking up the living room. Where the field, he's the plow. Life's a circus and he's the clown. He's a king without a crown. He's the hippest man in town. And the shit is going down in the middle of the spow. He's the hip man, the happener. He's the hip man, the happener. He's the hip man, the happener.
The weird and the willing, the hero, the villain.
The hip man, the happener.
Spinning his rhythm.
He's the hip man, the happener.
Watch Nero Vito.
He's the hip man, the
Spreading the
happener.
ripples and feeding the faithful with loaves and the fishes.
Robert Jasper was unstoppable, and his antics grew increasingly wild. He would dress up as a woman, an activity he was fairly adept at, and he would go into tobacco stores and drop bottles of chloroform, filling the shop with the smell of hospitals and death, and destroying all of the tobacco on display. Arrest after arrest after arrest followed, each time only increasing his power and his rage. And also I should point out, he wasn't against all smoking, you know. He was fond of the old Puffy McPuffington, you know, the jazz cabbage, the rusty Dermots. And he began another campaign later to legalize the herb. And in fact, he became one of the fathers of Dutch weed, of Nederweed. But that is another episode entirely, and we're going to get to that eventually. For now, it was time to relocate his shamanic antics and find another way to engage the youth and enrage the elderly. And so he made his way to a spot that would become the fulcrum of the 1960s, the center of the counterculture explosion that was about to engulf the city of Amsterdam. And here at the Spouw, he began his new artistic endeavor. And the street right there was where the newspapers and the media buildings were located. So it was the perfect spot for him to generate more publicity.
He started selling nude sketches with his buddy Ad Veldoen at the Liefertje statue, with the thought of bypassing the official art world of galleries and instead bringing art directly to the common folk on the street, selling the pieces for a pittance. But, as always, wherever Robert Jasper went, the forces of law and order followed and the arrests continued.
But this time was different. This time he'd had enough, and he turned all of his rage on a new symbol. The statue of Het Liefertje.
Het Liefertje, or the Little Darling, was a statue that was supposedly a gift to the people of Amsterdam that wasn't a city father or a military hero. It was to symbolize the children of Amsterdam. But all Robert Jasper could see was the plaque that stated it was funded by the Hunter Cigarette Company. This was an attack on the children of Amsterdam, the addicted consumers of tomorrow.
Het staat erop, in koper, genageld aan het graniet van het beeld. Van dus dit symbool wat voor altijd moet gelden. Wat is dit beeld dan anders dan het beeld van de verslaafde consument van morgen?
Every Saturday night at 12 o'clock, Robert Jasper would turn up and give his speeches to fanatic followers and bemused onlookers. He made prophecy after prophecy, railing against the corrupt government, consumer culture, and the media, whom he especially detested. He prophesied a world in which the media would become so corrupt that ordinary citizens would lose all faith in the news and look for their own truth. His chanting and incantations were the wildest scenes to be witnessed in the city, and his followers grew every week, his apostles following his every command. He would end every gathering with a burnt offering, setting fires around the statue, and he would bid farewell to the heaving crowds as the police dragged him off to the station yet again.
He was being watched closely by the police who revelled in their weekly baton charges and arrests, but he was unstoppable, and every Saturday night at 12 o'clock he was there, preaching to ever-increasing crowds. He prophesised that Amsterdam would become the magic centre of the world, awaiting the arrival of class. But who the fuck is Claas? Well, Sinterklaas is the Dutch Santa Claus, and he was going to lead the revolution.
I'm just a poor, shabby addict to cigarettes, for instance, and to lots of other things, lots of other noise, lots of other false images, you know. But I call for Klaas. When Klaas comes, everything is clear. No trouble, no misunderstandings. He is a light.
You still don't get it, I presume. He prophesied that new prophets called Klaas, as in Sinterklaas, will come from all around the world to Amsterdam, to the magic centre, and inhabit the empty houses. Klaas will come, he said, and the revolution will begin. And it was this 1 in a million chance phrase that set off the attack on the royal wedding of Princess Beatrix to the German lad called Klaus. As the gatherings grew larger, the police kind of became more and more violent, and Robert Jasper, he then began utilising the Dada-esque technique of participatory art. So when the police would baton charge those gathered around the statue, the field of tension was broken, and once the police baton connected with your jaw, the magic was created, showing the inherent violence of the state, and so the scenes grew wilder. He was written off in the newspapers as a lunatic, but as time went on, it would be discovered that the mainstream media may have owned the papers, but it was Robert Jasper who was writing the story. He had turned the entire city of Amsterdam into a stage in which a new form of preposterous theatre would be played out to an unsuspecting audience. And hanging around in the crowds were a pair of young anarchists who realised the power of the smoking magician, and they decided that if they joined forces, they could take over the entire city. So in the next chapter, we'll meet the characters who would harness the magic power of the happening and will give this movement its new purpose and name. It was to be the birth of Provo.
Oh, he's the hip man, the happener.
Smoking magician.
He's the hip man, the happener.
Man with a vision.
He's the hip man, the
The man on
happener.
a mission. The weirdo, the willing, the hero, the villain.
The hip man, the happener.
Spinning his rhythm.
He's the hip man, the happener.
Watch the revision.
He's the hip man, the
Spreading the
happener.
ripples and feeding the faithful with loaves and the fishes.
What's happening? There's one big happening in the world. It's happening daily.